This is Jay with Solar Components, here to show you how to make a solar cone. Here are some tools you'll need: a hammer, some tin snips, tape measure, a piece of cardboard to make a compass with, a grease pencil, some vinyl screws, and a power drill with a 1/4-inch drill bit. Now some other things you might consider using are some clamps. That will come in handy later. Let's get started. Now the very first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have the solar cone pattern you can find on our website. There will be a link in the description below, or if you're already on the website, there'll be a link to direct download right next to this video. What Mark is doing is he's marking out the measurements that are found on that pattern. They're around about 5 inches from center and 35 inches away from the center mark. Those are going to be the cursory measurements you're going to use to line up your compass. Now the compass that he's using is basically just a piece of cardboard with a few holes put in it, so he could, use one as an anchor point, use another as the 5-inch radius, and another as the 35-inch radius. What he's marking out is a piece of the Sunlight HP material in the 3-foot width. It's recommended that you use the 040 material for this project, since the 060 is a little too rigid to bend into a cone. Now is when you're going to want to put that compass to use. You can easily just make it out of cardboard as long as you know the measurements. Be about 5 inches and 35 inches. And then a measurement for your center point, obviously. You're just going to want to anchor that down at the center point to make sure it doesn't move at all. Nail is the best way to do this. And then you're just going to want to take a grease pencil and mark out a line at the 35-inch radius. You could use a Sharpie, but a grease pencil is probably a little bit better since it'll wipe away cleaner. And then here's one at the 5-inch radius. And just pull that nail right out. Make sure you got some nice, good, clean lines to make sure you got a straight cut. And now you're ready to cut. Now, when you start cutting, you're definitely going to want to lift up and give plenty of room. And what I mean by plenty of room is, see how Mark is kind of peeling it away as he's cutting it? The material is going to try to fight you. But if you just keep at it and keep good pressure on both sides, you'll get a nice straight cut with the tin snips. You can use a Sawzall for this material, but for this particular project, it is highly recommended to use the tin snips. And there you go. Now at this point, you can use this pattern right here as a sort of template for your other patterns. So if you did want to make several of these cones, you could easily use this as your template. So the next cut you're going to want to make is the overlap, the 1-inch overlap, which you've marked out at the very beginning, and then the inner radius, which is going to actually be the top of the cone. Again, look how Mark is putting pressure on the material and pulling up at the same time. That makes it so much easier to cut. Again, since it is a small cut right here as well, very important. He's going to use his knee and then pull the material up as it goes. And there you go. there's the outline of the cone. Pretty much it right there. I'm just gonna bend that around, which sounds easier than it really is. Now this is the part where clamps come in handy. You don't absolutely need them, but as you can see, it makes it so much easier, especially if you're doing this project by yourself. You basically only need them to hold for the first little drill right here. And it's outlined on the pattern where the markings for the holes are. But basically you're going to want to come in after you've cut. If you've measured after you cut, you can see here Mark's going to fasten it to hold it together in a cone shape, because it's much easier to drill them both at the same time as opposed to marking them out and then drilling them. Or you can mark them out, but it's easier to drill them in the actual cone shape itself. And the reason you're going to want to use vinyl screws instead of something else, or vinyl bolts I should say, instead of something else, is because those are going to expand around about the same coefficient as the actual material itself. And if you can find vinyl wing nuts to go on those bolts, that's even better. But like I was saying, you're going to want to drill about 2 inches up from the bottom of the cone. And then 2 inches from the top is where you're going to put the next marking, as Mark is going to show you right here. And then 7 inches in between each one of those holes. Mark chose to mark them out after he did the cutting. Alright, and the last thing you're going to want to do is hand tighten those bolts all the way down. And then just